Welcome to Ask Logic, the video series where we're answering your questions. I'm Todd Smidt and I'll be your host. Throughout this video series, we're going to cover things that we're experts in. So SEO, web design, web development, PPC, social media, photography, and videography. That's why we wanted to start Ask Lifted Logic, to help serve out content to people who aren't just our clients. Because the more you guys know, the better decisions you can make. Hey guys, welcome to Ask Lifted Logic. I'm your host, Todd Smidt, and I'm being joined by Katie King. Today we'll be talking logo and branding. Katie, do you want to go ahead and tell our viewers a little about your background?
Yeah, so I am a designer at Lifted Logic. I've worked for a few other companies doing design, then I've done freelance design for a while. I've done print and web, and now I primarily do web design here.
Sounds like you're a great person to talk about logo and branding.
I think I might be.
Yeah, you got a little background. I love it. Okay, well, at a really high level, when someone asks you what is branding or how do you define that?
Totally. So branding is just going to be basically like your name, any design, symbolism, or any other elements that really define what a company's all about, and what differentiates them from other companies or other people within their industry.
Mm-hmm. Usually when you're talking about branding, then are you talking about specifically like someone's logo? Is it just like their presentation as a company outward, or like are there certain things that you include that other people might not?
Yeah, so it's really like all encompassing.
Okay.
So it's going to be logo, colors, fonts, really just any way that you're visually expressing your company's identity.
And that's both going to be on the web and on print and like basically any way.
100%. Yep. Anything visual.
Cool. One of the questions we actually get the most is, does branding matter? And I'm going to caveat this by saying when I'm speaking to a designer, I have a pretty good idea what the answer is going to be. If I spoke to Adam or someone else, I might get a very different answer. Mm-hmm. But does branding matter?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's what differentiates your company from all of the others. And it also is just what immediately visually tells your story. So even if people don't necessarily know that they're taking it in and that they're developing an opinion about you, they are.
Do you think, or I guess how important is consistent branding? So if I'm a company and I've had 3 iterations of different logos, or I keep changing it, or I change my font or any of that kind of stuff, how do people actually notice that?
Yeah, I think so. It's really important that you stay consistent because it's going to make you look more professional. People are going to take you more seriously. And your branding is really an opportunity for you to tell people who you are and what you're all about, and to kind of form your idea of who you are in their mind. And if you keep changing that, that's really confusing to your consumer. They're not going to recognize it right away as being something that you're putting out there.
Is there like a secret designer rule on how often is too often to change branding or logos or fonts or any of that kind of stuff?
I wouldn't say there's I wouldn't say there's a rule to it. I would say if what you have is working for you, keep it. Okay. If it's not, change it. And I mean, there's never a time, I think that's really common, that people aren't totally consistent with their branding across the board. And the good news is that there's really never a time when you can't change that, when you can't, just make everything consistent and really
just
go from
do
there.
One kind of like big rollout, like, hey guys, welcome to our new brand. Here you go. Are there different ways to ensure that your branding is always consistent?
Yeah. So really, I would say the most important thing is to have a set of guidelines.
What does that mean when you say brand guidelines?
Yeah. So brand guidelines are basically what is going to keep your brand consistent and hold everyone to kind of the same standards. So that's going to be like fonts, colors, logos, how to use them, how not to use them. And you can share that with people in your company. You can share that with people outside of your company that are working for you. And that'll just help keep everyone on the same page and make sure that the message you're putting across is consistent.
Who usually creates brand guidelines for a company? Does the company itself? Do they usually outsource it to a creative agency? Like, how does that process work?
It's totally different. It just depends. If a company is large enough that they have their own internal design department, they might choose to do that. Here at Lifted Logic, we do it for a lot of companies, which is super fun to do.
Katie loves branding. It's like literally one of her favorite things. But I mean, it's really cool because you get to like reinvent a company, right?
Absolutely.
And it's usually either companies that are just starting out or they've been around like a really long time. And so you're getting to experience or like work with them to really figure out, all right, who do you want to be? more than like who you are.
Yeah. And it's awesome because it's super fun because even making a few small changes can totally impact the entire look. And it's really cool to be able to discover like who someone is, what they want to put across, and then make a few changes to really like bring that all together.
We had a client who got his logo done on Fiverr, and we were just in the middle of the website process. And our designers are always painfully honest. When a client asks, "What do you think of my logo?" they're going to tell you. So just keep that in mind. Whenever you ask a designer's opinion, you're always going to get it. And over the last couple of years, our lead designer, Hannah, she's kind of toned it down a little bit, where instead of things being complete shit, it's, I don't love that. So the client was like, well, I can give you guys an hour of time. Will that help me? And it was really, really cool to see her and like the design team work within that constraint of like, we only have an hour. How much can we like tweak this to make a big difference? And the logo looks completely different. And like he straight up loves it. And so it's really, really cool. Like when you're talking about working with a client to figure out like who they are, and you can make small tweaks and it can completely change a company. And I think that's probably like as a designer, probably one of the more rewarding things.
Totally.
Another question I have is like when someone talks about brand guidelines, what are like the standard things that are always included?
Yeah, so I would say definitely a logo, different variations of that logo. So like a horizontal logo, more of like a primary vertical logo, a mark.
When you say mark, what do you mean?
So when I say mark, I mean like like
an icon?
Like an icon. Like the visual icon element that would be a part of that. That's not your name or your any words. It's just that image. Like for example, with Apple, you're always going to think of the little Apple icon as their mark. That's awesome because you can use that in a lot of different ways when maybe you aren't able to use the full logo.
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of cases, especially like in like a marketing standpoint, when like even like on social media, where you might not have enough space.
Yeah.
Or people who have really like long vertical or horizontal logos on a website, it's really hard to use those in the header because it basically like makes your nav way smaller, right? So having that icon or mark is really important because it gives you flexibility with how you use your logo. And they're honestly just usually cooler.
Yeah.
I'm always a big fan of the marks.
Yeah, it's cool. And you can use it across like a wide variety of things. Like you said, you can use it on social media. You can put it like as an overlay over something. It's just like a fun thing to play around with.
What is your favorite thing inside the branding guidelines to create?
Probably colors.
Yeah?
Yeah, I like choosing the colors that a brand is going to use consistently.
What number of colors is too many colors?
Oh gosh.
Like if I have 2 colors in my logo or my brand kit versus like 30, like is there like a sweet spot where you want to shoot?
I would say 30 is too many.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I never thought I'd hear a designer say that there's too many colors.
I mean, I would say you want to have like, your like primary colors that you're using, and then maybe you have some more secondary colors, and then maybe you have like a variation of neutrals and grays. It can really run the gamut. It doesn't matter so much how many colors you're using versus like how you're using them, and if there's like a thoughtful reason for how many you have.
When you're doing like a design for a client, whether it's their logo or business cards or the website, and you get a list of say there's 4 primary colors and 4 secondary and like 2 tertiary, how do you decide which ones you want to use?
Just whatever looks best.
Yeah,
but I would say
I know there's like a rule where it's like you have to use 2 primary colors, or you have to use a secondary color, or like some combination.
Oh, are you talking about like primary as in like the color wheel?
No, I'm talking about like if a client gave us a brand kit, and it's like you have 4 like primary colors, and then 4 secondary, and you're getting ready to like design something new for them, whether it's like a social media ad.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Or something like that.
I thought you were saying like logo. Got you.
But there's only 3 primary colors in the color wheel, right?
Yeah.
Cool. They're actually all in this track jacket, so.
No,
they're not. They're actually not. I'm actually colorblind, so thanks, Katie. Thanks for bringing that up. How do you go about when you're given brand guideline restrictions? How do you go about choosing which ones you actually want to use?
Yeah, I would just say like you choose the ones that you feel like again like communicate that brand story the best. The ones that you feel like are going to fit with their target market, with what they're trying to do, and it'll just like visually communicate what they're all about.
That's cool. So when clients are going through a rebrand, how do you help them not lose their identity?
Yeah, I think like the first question you need to ask is, does their current logo and their current brand reflect their identity? And if it doesn't, you need to kind of like start over, or you need to solidify what that identity is and then kind of go from there.
Do you think a majority of the clients that you do that work for, do they usually want to start from scratch, or do they usually want to kind of tweak what they currently have? Or is it all over the place?
I would say a lot of them are from scratch.
Yeah.
A lot of the ones that I've seen, but there's certainly ones that they want to keep an aspect of, or I guess I would say that most have an aspect that they want to keep. Like they have a color, or they have some sort of imagery or something that they think is important that they really want to hold on to. But then others, totally want to start from scratch. So
which would you prefer?
I think it's always great when someone kind of has a direction that they want to go in. So I think that's the most important, is just that a client kind of has a direction and can tell you what they're looking for and what they want.
A question we get asked a lot as well, like for Lifted Logic, is how do I know if I need to update my logo?
I would say if it looks outdated, but it's not meant to be vintage looking, that's usually a good time to go ahead and update it.
Do you think most of the feedback on it looks outdated would come from like the client itself or like their customers?
A mixture of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe like just asking everyday people and just asking your customers or family members or whatever, like what they think about it, or what kind of comes top of mind when they first see it, especially people that haven't been exposed to your company before. It could be super helpful just to give you like an honest look at what it's like. Yeah.
Do you think that people do or pick companies based on like their logo?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think it plays a part.
But it's probably not going to be the deciding factor, but it can be a really good entry point.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it just, that's such a broad question. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because, like if I'm looking to get surgery somewhere, do I really care if the logo is like impeccable? Maybe not. But if it's
a branding company.
Yeah.
You might.
Yeah. We should probably cut that.
Yeah. That probably makes it really good. Yeah. That's interesting. I've thought about it in that way, where I think a lot of times for clients, like we always tell them, if it's not terrible, it can probably wait until like you have like a little extra like capital.
Right.
Because like a lot of clients would rather come in and wanting to redo their logo instead of like making money to grow their business.
Right.
Because like they think sometimes that redoing their logo is going to get them more business, and like while branding I think is really important, and I think the consistency is the biggest thing. Like your logo, even if your logo is just okay, but it's consistent across all of the platforms, like you're in a really good spot.
I would say like, I think that's exactly right. Like overall branding, I think matters the most versus like putting everything into the logo. And then if the rest of your branding doesn't match, it's like, what's the point?
A really weird example is we had a client one time who came in and they were like, hey, like we'll do all the photography of the site. You guys just build the framework. And we're like, cool. So we do the photography, and some of the photos were incredible and some of them were terrible. And the only reason you really noticed it was because they were different. Whereas like if they would all been terrible or all been good, like you'd be like, oh, it's consistent, so it's fine. So it's that same way in my head for branding, because as long as it's consistent across the internet or across like all of your like materials, like once again, like you're just in a good spot. What are some things that you wish clients knew ahead of time when they wanted to start redoing their logo or branding?
Well, that's a great question.
What helps you the most when like a client comes in and is like, hey, I'm ready to redo this. Like here are like 3 things that for you that you wish that they could just come in with right away?
That's a great question. I would say just to collectively, if there's multiple decision makers, to figure out kind of like who is that main decision maker. That's always super helpful. There are less things that are like more frustrating than when we do any kind of work, but especially design work for clients, and we think we're meeting with the decision maker, and then they basically approve it and they go back to the owner of the company or whoever it is, and the owner's like, no, this is not what I wanted at all. Yeah.
And so it's tough from like our perspective, where it's like, oh, we thought that you were being able to prove it. So I think in general, like having everyone that has a say in the final product in that initial meeting is really helpful.
Yeah, totally. And at the end of the day, a lot of things just come down to personal taste and what someone likes. And so there could be 5 people in a room that all work for the same company, all the same background, but they might just personally like different things a lot more.
Yeah.
So you just need to make sure that you're getting the person that is actually going to be like that final decision maker, is going to, yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah, maybe just like a direction of where you want to go. Any feedback. I would say it's always great when a client has opinions and when a client can say, yes, I like this. No, I don't like this. This is who we are. This isn't who we are. I think the hardest branding projects that we do are probably for people that don't have an opinion about
I like everything.
anything. Yeah.
I like all the colors.
Yeah.
I'm open to all icons.
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah. Which I think we do a pretty good job. We have a system in place where we have really good feedback. And I think our process before designing has been pretty ironed out. And
yeah.
Good.
Because we usually put together like a mood board with a bunch of different logo types. And then we create 3 completely unique concepts to kind of hone in on which one fits the client best. And after they kind of pick and give feedback, we really dive deep into like exploring that option. And so I think it covers a lot of bases, even for the clients who don't really know what they want. Like they're getting like to see stuff, and the ones who do are getting to see like in-depth variations of what they like. What are some things that if I'm getting ready to either buy a branding package or a logo that I should make sure to ask the company or the designer?
Yeah. So you're going to want those logo files. Most importantly, I think, is to ask for the working art files. So those are going to be your AI files or EPS. So that just basically means like the program that the designer has made that in. That's like the vector art, like the first original file.
Well, you said a vector. What's a vector file?
Yeah. So a vector file is a file. It's basically scalable. So, for instance, like if you took a photo of something right now, it would be that set size. And if you tried to blow it up, it would get really, really big. If you tried to scale it down, it would get really, really tiny. Vectors, you can scale them up or down as much as you want to.
And it keeps like the quality of the image or design.
Yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to want those just because that makes it really easy for whoever you hand it off to in the future. They can go in there and make tweaks or use it for other uses. You're also going to want PNG files and then SVGs if possible. That's not quite as important as the other ones, but always nice to have.
Is there a different use for the different file types? Like on the web specifically versus like in print?
Yeah, totally. So SVGs are great for the web because they're actually like, I don't know this completely. The developers could probably tell you more. But I know that they're code and like, I think mathematical equations maybe. But yeah,
right.
SVGs are code.
Yeah.
So I know the developers always like to have those when they actually build a website. PNGs are great. They're basically like a JPEG, except they can have a transparent background.
Nice.
So we always like those because then as designers, we're not limited to what we're putting your logo on top of. And then, yeah, the AI or EPS files are just great because you can scale those and you're really not limited.
If you're doing like print work for a client, like a brochure or a business card, what kind of file type do you want?
PNG.
PNG?
Yeah.
Is there a way to test or to know if your current logo works for like the web?
Yeah. So the most important things when you're looking at a logo for web are just the orientation of it and if it can be scalable or not.
What do you mean by orientation?
So the orientation on the web, a lot of times we want your logo to be in certain places like the navigation, the footer, maybe the menu somewhere. So for the navigation, we're really limited on space because no one likes when they go to a website and you have like a huge navigation at the top that's taking up half the screen that is just going to stick with you and is really ugly.
And it looks in like even like in that, if you would for some reason decide to do that, it doesn't look good for the rest of the nav, right? So like if you have a logo that takes up a third of the screen, all your words either have to be huge to like make it look the same or they're going to be tiny and it's look bad.
Right. Yeah, it just doesn't really match. So what we like to do is either use like a horizontal variation of the logo where if it is, for instance, like it has like a mark, like that kind of visual element, and then the words next to it, those could be just kind of like next to each other. So we like having that, or even just the mark a lot is all you need.
I know it's really common in, like in the web too. If it lands, it might be like the words and the mark, and then like on scroll, it might switch and animate to be just the mark.
Yeah.
Which is a really good example of like branding, like using those things together.
Totally. Yeah, that looks really nice.
Is it important for your colors like on the web and in print to match?
To an extent. So for print, you always want to use CMYK colors. For web, it's RGB, or you can just put in the hex code.
Big hex code guy.
Yeah, hex codes are great.
Yeah.
So yeah, for print, most printers are going to either want CMYK or Pantone. Pantone colors, not everyone's going to be able to do those, and they're going to be more expensive. So mostly CMYK.
Kind of same question for fonts. Because I know that obviously sometimes you might be in business for 50 years, and so you have a really strong print font. But that font is not available on the web, or it's $10,000. Do you feel like it's important that those match? Like, is it worth me spending the money to make sure they're identical, or are there ways around that?
It really just depends. I mean, if it's super, super unique and you think it'll be worth it and you want to buy that, absolutely go ahead. But there's a lot of resources of free fonts that you can use commercially that are totally great free web fonts. I would say just try to keep it as consistent as possible. Don't have one thing that you're using and then go completely the opposite direction with another one. But as long as you keep it consistent.
So like, as long as they're similar, you should be fine. Because outside of probably designers, most people might not necessarily notice.
Right. If they're similar enough, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm Comic Sans for life, but I think I might be the only one. But I actually might be the only one. We kind of mentioned this earlier, but like the versatility of logos and how important that is. So if you currently have a logo and it's just a word mark or just a mark, and like it's not possible to stack it, do you need to go back to the designer who did that and make sure you have all those types?
I'm probably biased because I feel like
yeah,
and that's like a pretty standard thing to include in any logos. Like I think that should probably be included from the get-go. So I don't think it would be too much to ask for to go back and ask for that. But as long as it's working for all of your different uses,
that's all that really matters. Is the biggest thing on when you're picking which version or type to use, is it spacing, or like how do you pick which one is the right one to use?
Yeah, I use spacing. I just I look at what is its purpose. So like in the nav, it's going to probably link back to home. It's going to be like you're going to see that right away, and it's going to need to not take up too much space. So then you go with like the horizontal one or the mark. If it's going to be on a billboard or like something huge or a side of a truck, I'm probably going to go with the full in your face, like primary stacked one. And it really just like depends on what you're using it for and kind of what you're trying to get across.
I know you've done a couple logos since you've been at Lifted Logic. Which one is your favorite?
Ooh, that's a great question. My mind just went blank, and I can only think of one.
I know you've done the Midwest Neuro. I know you've done Emmanuel Baptist Church. I feel like there's been a couple more as well.
Yeah. I really liked Emmanuel Baptist logo and how it turned out. I think it just felt great to do it because I think it's what they wanted. They have a really iconic steeple in their church, and we were able to incorporate that. I think it's something that's going to be a crowd pleaser and is going to age well in the future. Like it's like on trend, but it's not like a short-term trend, or it's not like trendy.
Yeah, it'll age well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess like how do you feel like as a designer, like once like the logo and the branding and all that stuff's done, you've done a good job?
If the client's happy and if they like it, because I can like things all day, but if, they get it and they feel like it doesn't represent who they are, it doesn't really matter. How
good does it make you feel when you see the work you've done like on the logo or branding side, like on shirts and trucks and buildings and billboards and all that stuff?
Oh, super cool. It's like probably the best part.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes when as a designer, you spend a lot of like lonely hours at your computer just moving things around.
Obsessing
and
over like
stuff.
centimeters.
Yeah. And so sometimes it doesn't really feel real until the site goes live or until you do see that on like a shirt or whatever. So yeah, that's always a really good feeling.
If there was one last parting thought that you could let people know about logos, branding, any of that kind of stuff, what would it be?
It's more important than you think it is.
Okay.
It really, like, at the end of the day, it really does matter. You might think that you don't notice it, but everyone does. Just like when you walk in a room, you notice if it's dark, if there's a bunch of windows, if it's light and airy, like how it's designed. When you see a color, it elicits a certain emotion. Like branding, even if you think you don't notice it, you're automatically forming an opinion and thinking something about it, even if you don't necessarily consciously realize that.
It's interesting. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us today, Katie. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Feel free to hashtag AskLL on social media, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. But keep in mind, there are no stupid questions, especially in the digital space.